Hello everyone, welcome back to Pretty in Punk, the punk rock podcast, and today we're back with episode 2, my second podcast episode ever. Thank you all so much for the feedback and for listening. I'm just so excited about this project, and most importantly, I'm so excited about today's episode. So in this episode, I'm going to share with you what I'm calling a punk rock starter pack, and I've compiled a list of my top 5 punk albums that I would tell a brand new punk music fan to listen to get them hooked on punk music. So whether you are a brand new punk fan looking for some songs to add to your playlist, or a longtime punk fan looking to learn more about your favorite albums, then you've come to the right place. But before we get into the main point of the episode and the punk rock starter pack, as I'm calling it, I start off every episode with a song of the week, if you didn't know. So I want to share with you a song that I have been loving recently. Now, it's kind of a funny name, but this band, a lot of their songs do have funny names, I would say. But the song is from the band The Garden, and the song is called Filthy Rabbit Hole. Again, I know it's like a really weird name, but I love The Garden. They are a modern band, and this song actually came out in June, so it came out 2 months ago now, and I've been really into this song. I think that it definitely incorporates some older punk vibes, but definitely is more modern as well. The opening, like from the beginning when you first listen to this song, it really has that fast, aggressive punk strumming, and that's what hooked me on this song right away. And I'm a big fan of The Garden. I think that their music is super unique. Like, no one does it like them. They're 2 twin brothers, actually, Wyatt and Fletcher Shears, and their music is definitely out there, and it's not for everyone, but if you like music that's a little bit more unique, maybe a little off-kilter, then I think that this band is for you. So definitely listen to this newest single, Filthy Rabbit Hole, from The Garden. I will have this song on my Song of the Week playlist, and that playlist will be on Spotify because I am personally a Spotify user. So going forward, you can find all of those songs from each episode on that playlist, and I will have that linked in the show notes and also linked in the YouTube description if you're watching this on video. So now that I have quickly shared my song of the week, I want to get into what I'm calling the punk rock starter pack. So I have compiled a list of the top 10 albums that I would share with somebody who has never listened to punk music before, who wants to get into punk music. These are the top 10 albums that I would tell them to listen to. So I'm breaking this up into parts and just giving you 5 of the albums today because, to be honest, I could have gone on forever, and when I had 10 albums listed, the episode was just way too long, so I had to break it down into 5, and I kind of think it's better that way, breaking it up and compiling it into shorter lists. So if you're wondering where a specific album is, most likely it'll be in another part, or it was an honorable mention, because even breaking it down into a top 10 was difficult for me. And if I feel like I need to add more, I can definitely do more than 10. I can do 15, I can do 20, there are so many punk albums that I think are just like such quintessential punk listening, so I can always do more, but I do plan on doing a part 2 to this with 5 more albums. And also, let me say that this list is completely my opinion, and I am basing these 5 albums off of the albums that really got me personally into punk music. So I'm imagining, this is the concept for the starter pack. Me, a long-term punk fan, someone comes up to me and they're like, hey, I really want to get into punk music, but I don't know where to start. What do you think are the top 5 albums I should listen to that would get me hooked on this genre of music? So this top 5 are the top 5 that really influenced me and my music taste, so this is what I would tell a new punk fan to check out. So number 1 on my list, and these are in no particular order, by the way, except for this one, because this album really means a lot to me, and you might already be able to tell what album that is. Number 1 is Milo Goes to College by Descendants. The first time I heard Milo Goes to College by Descendants, I was 15 or 16, and I was in physics class in high school, of all places to be. but our physics teacher had iPads for us to use to like do work on, and she would let us listen to music while we did work in class. So I hated physics class so much. Like, I am not a math or science person, and when you put those two together, that is just living hell for me. But having the ability to listen to music while doing my work was the saving grace in physics class. So the only available streaming platform on these school issued iPads was Pandora. So I went to the Green Day station on Pandora because I was a baby punk at this point. I didn't know a lot of punk bands, but I was really into Green Day at this time. So I went to the Green Day station, and the first song by Descendants that came up was Suburban Home, and immediately I was like, yeah, like this is the kind of music I like. And I was immediately really into that song. So since this was on Pandora, I couldn't listen to the album in full. So after that, once the school day was done and I got on the bus, I went to Spotify when I could actually listen to all of the songs that I wanted, and I listened to the album in full and was immediately hooked. So Milo Goes to College is Descendants' debut album, released in 1982. So this is a 42-year-old album, and to me, it hasn't aged at all. I'm 23. I started listening to this album when I was like 15 or 16, as I said, and to this day, I still listen to this album in full, like start to finish, on the regular. And I have from the time I was 15. In my opinion, this album has aged so well. Like, when I listen to it, I never think, oh, this album's really dated, it doesn't sound as well, but I never think that. I think this album has aged perfectly. So, if you are a new punk music fan, why should you listen to Milo Goes to College? I feel like a really good way that I would describe this album is that it is a crash course in what makes punk great. Like, it's fast, raw, gritty, and it's addictive listening to this album because you're just gonna want to play it over and over again. This album was released when Descendants were like probably 18 or 19 years old, so a lot of the lyrics really follow themes of like that teen angst kind of punk music, right? So the lyrics are relatable in that sense. I mean, when I was in high school, the lyrics were definitely more relatable. Now that I'm 23, do I relate to them? No, but I can listen to that album and reminisce on where I was in that stage of my life when I first heard Milo Goes to College. The lyrics cover everything from unrequited love, like in Hope, or growing up, like in Parents. And a lot of the songs are delivered with a sense of humor, like in songs like I Want to Be a Bear. And I think all of that, all of those themes added with the sense of humor, it's really cool to look back on because it's like, these were a bunch of 18, 19-year-old kids having fun, writing punk music, doing what they love. I think this album is a great balance too between being aggressive and melodic. So if you are a new punk music fan, it's a really great gateway to punk because it's not super hardcore. And this album and many Descendants albums in general are known for their fast and super short songs. So on this album, the longest song is 2 minutes and 14 seconds. The shortest is 42 seconds. So the longest one is Bikeage, the shortest is I Want to Be a Bear. And even the longest song is not a long song at all. But to me, like, that's punk. Like, punk songs of this era were that. They were super short, super fast, and they hook you right from the beginning. In total, the album is 22 minutes in length, so it's a super easy listen. So if you want to check it out, you can listen to it on your commute to work. You can listen to it on a walk while you're getting ready for something. Like, it's a super easy listen, and I highly suggest just like listening to the lyrics and taking it all in. And because of those super short, fast-paced songs, you really get a sense right away of what punk music is all about, especially punk music of this era. So from the beginning on this album, I think you'll be hooked because I can attest to that. I've been listening to this album since I was 15 and I'm 23 now, and I still love this album. It is still in my top 5 favorite albums ever. So the second album on my list is Dookie by Green Day. And now here y'all come in the comments if you're watching on video because I know there's a lot of people out there who don't like Green Day because they don't consider Green Day punk. They said that they're sellouts and a bunch of losers. And you know what? I hear you. I get it. I get your concerns. But for the purpose of this episode, I think this album makes sense. Because if there was an imaginary person asking me some albums to listen to get them into punk music, this is a perfect choice for someone who has never heard a punk song in their life. And I do 100% agree that Green Day can be considered pop punk, especially on this album, but bear with me, I think this album definitely makes sense for the theme of today's episode. So Dookie by Green Day. I would consider it like a gateway drug to punk and pop punk. It's like the perfect introduction to that realm of music if you've never listened to it before. So Dookie was released in 1994, so 2024 is actually its 30th anniversary, and I do have my Dookie 30th anniversary sweatshirt, which I love. And kind of like Milo Goes to College, I think that this album definitely has some relatability to this day, and it's another one of those albums that I don't think has aged at all. Like, it still seems very relevant and current. And like Milo Goes to College, a lot of the songs do feature themes that do have that teen angst vibe, like unrequited love, like growing up, just teen angst in general. Even boredom is a theme on the album, and I think if you're a younger person wanting to get into punk music, this is a really great introduction to that. And with all of those themes in the lyrics, add in really catchy hooks, really catchy riffs, and you got yourself Dookie by Green Day. I really do think this album is such a great one for newcomers because the production element of this album is a lot cleaner, and it's not as like raw, rough around the edges, DIY punk. It's very clean production, so if you haven't listened to punk music before, it's not as like hard hitting when you first listen to it, right? And it's not super hardcore at all. So, like, in any way, it's not hardcore. So I think once you listen to this, if you really do want to get into punk music, once you dip your toes into this, you are going to want to see what else is out there and be like, okay, that was cool. Let's try something a little more hardcore now, right? So if you aren't used to that super raw punk sound, I do think this is for you. And this album is just really quintessential punk and pop punk listening. I mean, even people who don't listen to those genres of music, they know Dookie. They know that album cover, and I can't even tell you how many times I've been in a grocery store or like a Walmart or even at a local coffee shop, and I've heard Basket Case, When I Come Around, or Long View, because to this day, they're just such popular songs. I mean, even I saw Green Day, I think it was on the Hell and Mega tour that I saw them, and the ages ranged anywhere from like 9 to 60 years old. Like, there were people of all ages because I think Green Day, their music really speaks to any age. So no matter what kind of punk fan you are, this is just a really quintessential album. I really do think that Dookie is a really, really great starting point for newer punk fans, because even people who aren't tried and true punk fans, they like this album and they like the songs on it. I have friends that don't listen to punk music at all, but they like these songs. Like, if I'm driving and one of these songs comes on in the car, they sing along because they're just iconic. Everyone knows Dookie. It's equal parts punk and pop punk, and because of that, I think if you are a newcomer to this realm of music, this is the perfect album for you. So, we just talked about Dookie, which was released in 1994, but let's bring it back and talk about Suffer by Bad Religion. This is my all-time favorite Bad Religion album, and like Milo Goes to College, I still listen to it in full to this day. I think that Suffer by Bad Religion is such a great starting point as a newer punk fan because it's like a blueprint to punk. It's fast, it's aggressive, but the lyrics are really meaningful, and that is punk. Like a lot of punk albums, this is another short and fast album. It is 26 minutes total in length, and the longest song is 2 minutes and 44 seconds, and the shortest is 1 minute and 7 seconds. So it's another easy listen if you want to discover a new album. It's not gonna take up an hour, it'll take up 26 minutes exactly. This album shows you who Bad Religion is. The opening song on this album is You Are the Government, and that is just one of those quintessential political punk songs, and I think that really encapsulates what punk is. Punk is political. There's a lot of political punk songs, punk albums out there. I think the lyrics like take you back at first because it's like, oh, like we are the government, you know, that's what it's saying, and it's a powerful song. I mean, even just like the opening lyrics, like sit down and listen, they'll tell you where you're wrong, it's like that really grabs you. And I do think the whole you are the government hook chorus, that really grabs you as well, because I think that is just a really powerful and punk message. This album is just also really melodic to me. I think that Bad Religion have quite the talent for songwriting, both lyrically and musically. A big staple of their music, and especially on this album, is oohs and ahs. So when you're listening, it makes it really easy to sing along and hum along and learn the choruses and bridges of the lyrics. Greg Graffin, too, the lead singer of Bad Religion, his vocals are very, very clean. So it's not that like hardcore in-your-face vocals that a lot of people think of when they think of punk. They're really clean, and he has a really great voice, and I think that if you are a newer punk fan, that makes it really easy to listen to because it's not like screaming, quote-unquote, as people would say. The vocals are clean, so it makes it really easy to listen to. I touched on this earlier with You Are the Government, but many of their lyrics are very thought-provoking, meaningful, politically minded songs, and a lot of the topics are politics, but also society, personal struggles, and it's music with a message. And to me, like, that's what makes punk so powerful. And when I think of their more meaningful and thought-provoking songs, I think that's what makes punk music with a message, you know? So I think those songs are super important when it comes to the world of punk music. So I think that this is a great intro and a great place to start for someone who is new to punk music. So this next pick is from one of my all-time favorite bands, and that is Misfits. And the Misfits have a really, really weird and honestly kind of confusing history and backstory, and that's its own episode because I could talk about that for like 45 minutes to an hour because there's just so much that goes into that topic. But ever since I was 15 and started listening to punk music, I was really, really drawn to Misfits, but more specifically, the Danzig era Misfits. That is my favorite era, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, there are two very defining era of Misfits. So from 1977 to 1983, Glenn Danzig was the band's frontman and the songwriter for the band. Then after a breakup in 1983, it wasn't until 1995 that the original members, Jerry Only and Doyle, sought out to reform the band, and they recruited Michael Graves, who became the new frontman for the band. Again, this is not a Misfits deep dive episode, so that's a super brief history before we get into the album that I have chosen. But if you're going to be a punk fan, Misfits is quintessential punk listening, okay? I mean, even if you don't know who they are, you know that logo, and you've seen that logo. I see it everywhere, honestly. That logo is the black and white skull known as the Crimson Ghost. If you're listening to this, look it up and you'll know immediately what I'm talking about, but if you're watching on YouTube, I will put a photo up, but you will know exactly what I'm talking about. So even if you don't know Misfits and you aren't a punk fan, this logo alone is iconic. So the Misfits album that I chose in this top 5 punk rock starter pack is from the Danzig era, and that album is Static Age. Static Age by Misfits is a really cool and great introduction to the world of punk music because it shows you how unique and different punk can be. I mean, no one does it like Misfits, right? They are completely unique, and their whole genre of punk is called horror punk. So the Misfits combined punk music with these like horror movie aesthetics, creating this genre of horror punk. And their songs frequently referenced classic horror films, sci-fi films, and they kind of have this like horror movie, Halloween-y sounding vibe, if that makes sense. There are a lot of songs that I think you'll know what I mean when I say that, like Theme for a Jackal, for example. So they almost have this like horror movie sounding vibe, I would say. Static Age is really interesting. So Static Age is the third studio album from Misfits, but it wasn't always intended to be that way. So interestingly enough, it was recorded in 1978, but was not released in its entirety until 1996, which is really interesting. So Static Age was released as part of the Misfits box set, which was essentially just a boxed set of a bunch of Danzig era material. So a lot of this included like Collection 1 and 2, Legacy of Brutality, Evil Live, a lot of studio recordings as well, and of course, finally seeing the light of day that it deserved, Static Age. And it's so interesting because so many of the songs on Static Age are some of the most iconic Misfit songs, like Last Caress, Hybrid Moments, Attitude, Bullet, We Are 138. I mean, so on and so on. I think all of the songs on the album are pretty iconic, but that's just to name a few. And a lot of the songs were released as singles prior to the final release of Static Age, but it really wasn't until Static Age that these songs were on a full-length album. It's just so interesting that even though this album wasn't released until decades after it was first recorded, most of the songs on this are some of the most iconic songs from Misfits. So I've given you a lot of backstory here, but why listen to Static Age as a new punk fan? So if that history I gave you isn't intriguing enough, I don't know what would be, but I really do think it showcases how unique punk bands are. And despite them being horror punk, their songs are catchy. I mean, Glenn Danzig knew how to write a hook, and he knew how to write catchy lyrics that really get stuck in your head. Like, again, Last Caress, Hybrid Moments, and of course We Are 138, but that song is like one of the most repetitive songs ever, so of course it's gonna get stuck in your head. So despite nailing down this really specific horror punk sound, I think that their music can really be appealing to any punk fan because, like a lot of other punk bands, they have those short and fast-paced songs. And again, like a lot of albums and songs that I've mentioned before, they are pretty short and most of them are under 2 minutes. Plus, Glenn Danzig's vocals are really interesting and kind of fascinating to me. I mean, I've always found his voice really cool and not like other punk vocalists that you may think of when you think of punk music. I think his voice alone is what really grabs you when you first hear the music, and that definitely when I first started listening to Misfits, that was what I first noticed. I was like, oh, this guy's voice is really cool. It's not typical what a lot of people might think of, like higher sounding, more aggressive, quote unquote, screaming, almost like punk sound. It's deep and it's very like melodic and has this kind of gothic feel to it, I would say, and I would call him like a punk crooner. Like, that's what I would define him as, if that makes sense, because of that like deep melodic sound, but he still has that gritty, raw punk sound to his voice as well. And there definitely are songs where his vocals are more aggressive, but other songs where his voice is a little more laid back and melodic. So I think that Glenn Danzig is just one of the coolest punk vocalists out there. So I think it's pretty clear. I love Misfits, specifically the Danzig era Misfits. I mean, I've tried listening to the post-Danzig era Misfits, but it's just not for me. There are a couple songs that I do enjoy, but I don't go out of my way to listen to them. They're just not for me. They're not my first pick. I really am a Danzig era purist. That is what I love. And you know, if you like the Michael Graves era, more power to you. We can all like different things, but I mean, when I see that iconic Misfits logo, I think of songs like Last Caress, like Hybrid Moments, Where Eagles Dare, Bullet, Return of the Fly. Those are the songs that I think of, and to me, like, that is Misfits. Okay, so now that you have some essential punk listening under your belt, like Milo Goes to College, Suffer, Dookie, and Static Age, it's time to check out some hardcore punk. I think you're ready, okay? So now I'm going to be talking about Minor Threat, specifically their album First to 7 Inches, which is actually a compilation album of their first 2 EPs. This compilation was released in 1984 and it combines their first 2 7 Inches, hence the title. So it's a combo of Minor Threat and its follow-up, My Eyes. If you're going to be a punk fan, more specifically a hardcore punk fan, First to 7 Inches by Minor Threat is crucial. I mean, a lot of Minor Threat's most well-known songs are from this album, like I Don't Want to Hear It, Straight Edge, and their self-titled song, Minor Threat, of course. One song off of this album that is really important to know, and a song that why I would really urge people to listen to this album to if they're getting into punk is Straight Edge. So in the song Straight Edge by Minor Threat, vocalist Ian MacKaye is describing his straight edge lifestyle, which basically means he doesn't partake in drugs and he believes that he has better things to do than that. So this song really was the inspiration and the catalyst for the straight edge subculture and punk movement. So the straight edge movement was already forming and underway prior to the release of this song, but once this song was released, it really gave it a name and kind of a face for the straight edge movement. And it's crazy too that this song had so much influence and basically gave this movement a name considering it's 46 seconds long, but for a punk song, 46 seconds is all it takes to become an iconic piece of history. So I think that this punk history alone is enough reason to check out this song and this album as a whole. If you want to listen to punk music, and more specifically hardcore punk music, you gotta know Minor Threat. I don't make the rules, I just follow them, okay? I'm telling you, you have to know Minor Threat. This album gets straight to the point. From the first opening song, Filler, already you were hit with those lightning speed riffs, those super short and fast songs, and Ian MacKaye's really aggressive vocals, and immediately it hits you, and you are like, okay, we're in for a ride. A whole 18-minute long ride, but a ride nonetheless. So if you are new to the hardcore punk scene and you're first listening to this album, the raw, DIY, and unpolished sound might be like a lot at first to you, but it's going to leave you captivated, trust me. Plus, despite the songs being so gritty and raw and DIY sounding, a lot of them are really catchy. Like for example, their self-titled song, Minor Threat, is really catchy, and so is I Don't Want to Hear It, and a lot of those songs have even been covered by a lot of other punk bands like The Suicide Machines, Sublime, Rise Against, Silverchair, and several others, which just shows you like how iconic and influential these songs are that other big bands also want to cover them. And it just shows you that this band really had a lasting impression on the punk scene because of basically being the catalyst for the straight edge movement and also having a bunch of other people cover their songs, and you know, people still have their logo on t-shirts, and despite being such an iconic band in punk history, they were only together for 3 years. So I think this album is really worth the listen because it's a great piece of punk history. So overall, Minor Threat and this album, this compilation album, I should say, specifically, is crucial if you're going to be a punk fan, and it's a great entryway to the whole hardcore punk side of punk music. So, with all of that being said, this concludes the Punk Rock Starter Pack Part 1. And this episode for me was just really, really fun to make because I like writing all of my thoughts out just so I can have like something to go off of, so I'm not just, you know, improvising the whole time. And obviously I wanted to like fact check everything, and I was basically just researching my favorite topic ever for fun for this podcast episode. So I was having so much fun writing all of this, and you know, again, these top 5 are albums that really influenced me personally and really means something to me. And I think that these 5 albums are really, really interesting as a top 5 because they're all so different. I mean, we have the hardcore punk, the horror punk, political punk, pop punk, like this is like a top 5 starter pack, truly. I mean, it really shows you just how different and unique all kinds of punk bands can be. Again, I do plan on making a part 2 to this because 10 just would have been so many, so stay tuned for part 2 for another 5. So if you're watching this podcast on video, I would love for you to comment down below which one of these 5 albums is your favorite, or if I didn't mention your favorite, let me know what album really got you into punk music. And if you are listening to this episode on wherever you stream your podcasts, go to my TikTok or Instagram at prettyandpunkpod and comment on my most recent video and let me know what album got you into punk music. So to wrap it up, I want to let you know where you can find me. All of my socials are at prettyandpunkpod. That is Instagram and TikTok. You can find to watch this on YouTube, Pretty and Punk, the punk rock podcast, and you can also find Pretty and Punk, the punk rock podcast on all streaming platforms as well. So wherever you get your podcasts, I will be there, and I will also have the Song of the Week playlist listed in the description and the show notes too. So if you want to follow along what song I'm loving each week, then definitely check that out and follow that playlist. But this concludes part 1 of my punk rock starter pack. So I do upload episodes every single Friday, so be sure to follow my socials to see when I drop a new episode, but you can expect Fridays to be the day. So thank you all so much for listening to Pretty and Punk, the punk rock podcast, and I will see you in the next episode.